Have you ever seen one of those headlines and just thought, how? How does an employee who's trying to help their company end up causing an absolute disaster? It's a really weird paradox, right? And it turns out the line between being a star employee and a huge liability is way, way thinner than you'd think. Let's get into it.
You know, this old saying, it pretty much hits the nail on the head. It perfectly captures this whole puzzle. So, how do good intentions go so spectacularly wrong at work? We're going to look at the science of why good employees sometimes do some pretty destructive things. Okay, check out this story. To save their company some cash, engineers at Royal Caribbean literally destroyed evidence of illegal dumping. They even ordered the crew to lie to the Coast Guard. And that good intention? It backfired, big time, leading to federal charges and massive, massive fines.
Or how about this one? A middle school principal, dead set on enforcing a zero-tolerance drug policy, ordered a 13-year-old student, Savannah Redding, to be strip-searched for ibuprofen. The Supreme Court later called the act humiliating and unconstitutional. And the craziest part? No drugs were found.
And then there was a Walmart in China. Managers trying to boost their store's profits were caught fraudulently mislabeling regular old pork as organic. Their attempt to help the bottom line, it ended with them getting arrested.
So you've got a cover-up, a serious violation of rights, and blatant consumer fraud. I mean, on the surface, these seem totally unrelated, but what if they all come from the exact same place? What is the invisible thread that connects all of them?
We're going to follow the clues here. First, we'll find that one common link. Then we'll look at the good employee's dark side, get inside the decision to cause harm, uncover the recipe for disaster, and finally trace that devastating ripple effect of ruin.
So what is the link? It's not just that they all broke the law. No, the real connection is why they did it. In every single one of these cases, the employee genuinely believed they were doing something good for their organization.
Well, researchers actually have a name for this. It's called Detrimental Citizenship Behavior, or DCB for short. And the definition is key. It's an action you choose to take, that you think helps the company, but that ultimately causes unreasonable harm to someone else. Lying to the Coast Guard, strip-searching a student, mislabeling pork. Yep, they all fit perfectly.
And this concept, DCB, it is so powerful because it shines a light on the dark side of being a good employee. We're not talking about just a few bad apples here. We're talking about how the very desire to help your company can get twisted into something really harmful.
Think of DCB as this giant umbrella. It covers everything from corporate crime and corruption to stuff like unethical pro-organizational behavior. It even includes extreme rule following. You know, like a gate agent who, to protect company revenue, rigidly enforces a tiny rule that ends up leaving an entire family stranded. In their mind, they're helping, but they're still causing harm.
Okay, so we know what DCB is, but the million-dollar question is, why does it happen? How does a person go from wanting to help to actively causing harm? Well, the answer seems to lie down two very different psychological paths.
The research points to two main ways our brains can go off the rails here. First, there's the reflexive path. This is your gut reaction. It's fast, emotional, basically autopilot. Then there's the proactive path. This is the calculated plan. It's slower, deliberate, and a kind of creative but really destructive form of problem solving.
The Savannah Redding case? A perfect example of that reflexive path. The principal saw a problem, a student suspected of having drugs. His brain instantly matched that pattern to a known threat. The emotional pressure to enforce that zero-tolerance policy just took over, and it led directly to an extreme action with zero deliberation. It was a pure gut reaction.
But the Royal Caribbean cover-up shows the proactive path. When those engineers found out the Coast Guard was investigating, they didn't just react. They calmly identified the problem, used their technical knowledge to brainstorm solutions, and then deliberately chose the worst one: destroy the evidence and lie. This wasn't a gut reaction. It was a cold, calculated criminal plan.
So we've got two paths, the gut reaction and the calculated plan. But what makes an employee more likely to go down either of these roads in the first place? Well, it turns out there's a kind of psychological recipe for disaster, and it really only has two key ingredients.
First ingredient, high organizational concern. This is when you have an excessive, almost obsessive desire for the company to succeed. Maybe your bonus or even your whole identity is tied to it. The second ingredient, low ethical sensitivity.
This is like having a giant blind spot to the moral consequences for other people. You combine caring way too much about company goals with caring way too little about the ethical fallout, and you have the perfect recipe for DCB.
Now, you might think an act of DCB is just a single, isolated event, but it's not. The moment it happens, it's like tipping over the first domino in a long, destructive chain reaction. The consequences are never, ever contained.
And this is the trigger. An act of DCB could go on for years, totally hidden. But the second a stakeholder like a customer or a regulator finds out, that's when the chain reaction begins. Getting caught is the first domino to fall.
After detection, the story just explodes. An initial complaint activates all these networks, social media, the news, the courts, and this creates a vicious feedback loop where more awareness leads to more reaction, which leads to even more awareness, amplifying a single bad act into a full-blown corporate crisis.
And the cost is staggering, starting with the individual. The same person who was just trying to help the company now faces public humiliation, the loss of their career, and sometimes even prison time.
And the organization they tried so desperately to protect, it gets slammed with huge fines, lost business, and long-term damage to its reputation and the public's trust.
But the damage even ripples out to all of us, to society. Every one of these scandals erodes public trust just a little bit more, which leads to more burdensome regulations and creates economic losses that affect everyone.
Which brings us right back to that incredibly fine line we started with. The real question is, how do you know when your desire to help your organization is about to cross it and go way too far?